Yeah. Children are like petri dishes. They go to summer camp and there's no telling what they're going to bring home to you. So
this is true. Well, I just started our recording of the webinar, and we'll go ahead and get started. We'll jump right into it. My name is Andre Bro. I work on the team at One Acadiana, and we are partnering with business resource organizations across the Acadiana region, including LEDA, Opportunity Machine, the Downtown Development Authority, United Way of Acadiana, and other local chambers and economic development offices around the region to bring you this series of Acadiana business resource webinars in response to COVID-19 to support the business community and particularly our small businesses. And today we're really excited this is our 13th webinar in the series, and we're really excited to be joined by 4 of our legislators for now. And I think Jean-Paul's on the way. I see a text just came through from him as well. So we'll have hopefully 5 of our state representatives from the Acadiana region with us today to talk about the outcomes of the regular and special legislative sessions and how they're going to impact business in our region. But before we jump into the panel, I'm going to turn it over to my boss, One Acadiana's president and CEO, Troy Wayman, to give a few remarks.
Thanks, Andre, and I want to thank everybody for joining us, and special thanks to our panelists, our Acadiana delegation representatives, and this is in alphabetical order, not by seniority, but Representative Beau Boyer, Representative Stuart Bishop, Representative Jean-Paul Cusson, hopefully will be on in a moment, Representative Julie Emerson, and Representative John Stefanski. And I will point out that Representative Stefanski and Representative Boyer were the first 2 on the call, so they were on it this morning. We're honored to have such a strong delegation representing us in Baton Rouge. I will tell you, I've worked with a number of organizations around the Southeast, and it is amazing the accessibility that we have with our representatives and the work that they do and the understanding that they have of the efforts that we're involved in economic development, trying to create and preserve jobs. And it's incredibly rewarding to work with such a group, and we appreciate the representation that you provide and the leadership that you provide for all of us. I think it's fair to say in terms of legislative leadership positions, we have the strongest delegation of any region in the state right now. And this is particularly extraordinary few months for our legislators. You know, I've jokingly made the comment that I've been in the state less than 3 years and I've never seen so many special sessions. So I think our legislators work harder than just about anybody in the country. But you know, we've had the special sessions, and then they've had the needs of COVID-19 recovery, in addition to demands of other important issues. You know, 1A has stayed actively engaged throughout both the regular and the special sessions, and we've worked to keep our investors, members, and partners in the know with weekly legislative updates on priority issues. We look forward to diving into some of these issues today with our legislators. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to One Acadiana's Vice President of Policy, Andre Bro, to moderate the discussion. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Troy. And I'm going to start our panel discussion. I have I've taken moderator privilege with a few questions, a couple questions for each of our legislators to touch on some of the issues that were covered during the session. If I direct a question to you about an issue that you don't feel like you're the best representative to speak on, feel free to call on one of your colleagues as well. But I'm going to start with Representative Bishop to talk about one of the main accomplishments of the session in terms of impact for business, and that was the bill that created the Louisiana Main Street Recovery Grant Program. And we had a webinar. Our last webinar was actually with Treasurer Schroeder to talk about that program. So some of you are probably already pretty familiar with that. So 2-part question, I guess, to kick things off for you, Representative Bishop. If you could talk about the Main Street Recovery Program, how that's going to impact business. And then one other issue that I'll throw to you as well, that I know you were very involved on in both the regular session and the special session, and that's providing some temporary tax relief to business, particularly through the temporary and partial suspension of the corporate franchise tax, which is something you were a leader on. So if you could start us off by talking about those 2 issues, That would be awesome.
I'll start with the second part, and then I'll probably kick the Main Street over to Representative Stefanski or Boyer. But on what we did do on severance tax, we suspended for a year on a fiscal note of $7.1 million for 1 year. Originally, my bill on, I'm sorry, I said severance, it's a franchise tax. Originally, my bill was a 4-year bill, and it was going to cost about 9.1 the first year, 10.2 over the next 3 years. We could get to 67 votes. We could never get to the 2/3 that was needed on it. So therefore, we went with a 1 year from Senator Ireland, which was a little more palatable for the body. And we ended up getting about 86 votes on that. That was just one from the Economic Task Resource Committee, and they had given us several others as well as severance tax as well. So there were several things to help small business. It's up to $300,000, so it actually targets small business rather than the corporations. So it's something that I think will be great for the small communities as well as the large communities, but the small businesses, Main Street businesses of Louisiana. And as far as Main Street, I'll let Representative Stefanski or Boyer go ahead and tackle that one if you don't mind.
Yeah, and so we carved out part of our COVID money. We used a percentage of that to offer to small businesses up to $15,000 per business. And the priority is for businesses who didn't get any federal aid in their go around when they offered that. It started off at $300 million. I think ultimately it ended up at $275 million because we carved out $50 million, and 25 of that came out for our frontline workers, which offers them believe it's a tax credit that is offered if you're a frontline worker and you made less than $50,000.
We'll stick with you, Representative Stefanski. Another bill that you worked on was the increase in vendors' compensation for businesses that collect sales tax. Could you talk about that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So vendors' compensation is vendors who collect the state's sales tax. The state allows them to keep a percentage of that, basically to compensate them for collecting the state's money. So if a business is going to calculate and remit that money to the state, they have a duty to do that, but it also takes manpower and it takes some resources to be able to do that. So they get to keep a certain percentage. We did a small increase of that percentage. And even though it's not a ton of money, it's direct money into our small business, Louisiana small businesses' pockets. So that was one of the bills that ultimately made it all the way through. That was part of our Economic Recovery Task Force. So I was happy to carry that one and glad that the governor ended up signing that about a week ago.
Something else the task force supported, the legislature's Louisiana Economic Recovery Task Force, was the expansion of the enterprise zone programs and the quality jobs programs to include retail, hotel, and restaurants, which were obviously very impacted by COVID-19. I don't know which of you is kind of best equipped to speak to that, but could one of you kind of talk about the expansion of those programs and the efforts to help those businesses?
I think Bo, didn't he? I think Bo handled that. I don't see him on.
Yeah, I'm unmuting right now. So the current enterprise zone credit was expanded, and we've had this program in the state for many years, and it's helped provide some sort of an incentive for businesses, for new hires, especially in areas that aren't the best from an economic standpoint, from an income and wage standpoint. The state has set up these areas ahead of time. And it was limited to certain industries, and the restaurants and those folks were excluded from the enterprise zone credit a number of years ago. And so basically what we allowed them to do is to come back into it. So now those employers have an incentive to hire those people back. And the hotels, the restaurants, the bars, all these people, if you look, they've probably been hit the hardest just from the hospitality industry standpoint. So we thought it was very important to give them an incentive to hire these people back. We need to get all of our people working, and this was one of those tools that we had in the box to help those employers out and get those people back to work.
Another issue, thank you, Representative Boyer, that the task force recommended and the legislature was able to pass during the session was liability protections for businesses. So I'll throw it back to you, Representative Boyer, or whichever of you feels best equipped to speak to that issue.
Trying to unmute it there. Yep. So what we did is there was a big concern with regards to employers who were hiring people back, that they could maybe face liability should the employees, allege that they caught COVID at their workforce. So what we did is we passed a number of basically bills that would allow the employers to be protected from that liability. So you have the case of different businesses that are going to have the protection. You're going to have schools, K through 12, that are also protected as well. So if a K through 12 school wants to open up and a teacher or someone says that they caught COVID at the school, they are going to be protected from any kind of liability with regards to lawsuits. And so we thought this was very important to keep employers from being fearful for opening, due to we have a pretty litigious state, if everyone doesn't realize already. And so anything that we could do to shield our employers from being subject to some of these lawsuits is important. And it's another item to help people get back to work and to get rid of any excuse that an employer would have for not hiring employees back.
I'm gonna save Representative Cusson for last, because he just joined us and I think he's just settled in. But I'll throw it to Representative Emerson now. In addition to efforts to support businesses, the legislature also took efforts to support workers. And a big passion of yours since joining the legislature has been sort of those workforce opportunities and pathways to further education and licensure. Could you talk about some of the steps that you were involved on, particularly in the regular session?
Yeah, sure. So one of the big things that we did, thanks, Andre, as you said, kind of one of my main missions when I first got in the legislature was doing my best to remove barriers to entry into the workforce. And then, of course, as I start talking, my dog's gonna come up here. But so one of the bills that we did this session, and frankly, we almost didn't do it. Thought maybe we're gonna push it to next session, but in these really uncertain times, we thought maybe it would be very helpful. So it was called the Free the Transcript Bill. And basically what it does is at this point in time, as I'm sure a lot of you may know, unfortunately, if you have any outstanding bills or tuition or fees or anything with your university, you can't obtain your transcript. And for some people, it's not a big deal. They'll go pay a $30 parking ticket. It's a little embarrassing when you don't have your diploma and can't get your transcript on graduation day. But for some people, it's not a big deal. But for other people, it may be a serious hindrance. I heard a lot of stories from students about not being able to apply to law school on time or graduate school or whatever that may be. So the bill was basically just to say that certainly does not absolve you of any debt. You have to go to the Office of Debt. It takes it to the Office of Debt Recovery, which the Board of Regents and the head of UL system, Dr. Jim Henderson, Richardson Henderson, said that that's very successful. And so basically, we were trying to get this bill through. Unfortunately, it got stopped up a little bit in the Senate. But we had, they did put an amendment on there that basically said it's, instead of required, it's permissive. So they're kind of kicking it to the individual boards of the schools and the systems to opt in if they wanted to do it. But we're going to keep pushing the issue. I feel like at least we got sort of one foot in the door and people talking about it. We had a lot of tremendous testimony from students. And like I said, the Board of Regents was behind it and pushing it. So I feel like it's a good movement. And like I said, certainly it's not to absolve anyone of debt. But if a student can't get out there and either further their education or get into the workforce, then they're not going to be able to make the money to actually pay those debts. So that was one thing we worked on, and sometimes it takes a few years to actually get some good legislation across. So hopefully we'll keep pushing the issue.
And we appreciate your efforts on that too, because that was a key bill aligned with our 55 by 25 educational attainment initiative. So working with Dr. Savoy, I think is on our webinar today, and Dr. Henderson at the UL system. They have a Compete Louisiana initiative to try to get some adults with some college but no degree who are close to finishing their degree to re-enroll in the UL system to finish their degree, which will help with our overall educational attainment rate. It'll help those adults get better jobs and higher earnings. But the barrier that you work to solve, Representative Emerson, with sort of the block of the transcript for anyone with any debt to those institutions was a major barrier. So we're happy to take the first step over that barrier and to work with you on working with the management boards to keep moving that issue forward. I think Representative Cusson is settled in now, so I'll talk about another bill, or have you talk about another bill that we worked with our delegation on these sessions, and that was the bill to modernize the digital media tax credit. And while it did not pass, it was still an excellent bill, and we're still hopeful that it'll move forward in the next session. And that's something you co-authored with Representative Pierre. I know, could you say a few words about that?
Yeah, and it had a kind of a short shelf life this year because actually some of our key supporters in LED were out on maternity leave. And so we were having, we were working together, all of us kind of off-site, on-site, and all of the pieces. We just didn't have enough time to bring it together because some of the component pieces were pretty innovative as far as an additional tax credit when you used the money that you were saving to put towards training for minorities and women, for new hires and veterans. So that was a pretty cool feature to increase the tax credit by 2%. But we're going to get to that. We're going to reintroduce it. And Representative Pierre and I have committed to doing it again as co-authors. And it's going to be good for Lafayette, but it's going to be good for the state. And frankly, Representative Stefanski was there, and I think it was one of the only bills that some of the members on his committee that were adamantly opposed to many of the tax credits, they actually jumped out of their seats to support this one. So it shows, number one, how strong the digital media tax credit is for it to stand up on its own. And then secondly, for this kind of this new feature that we added relative to training, how that's going to make it really bipartisan. And I think once we get all the logistics down with LED, it's going to fly through the policy process.
I'll stick with you, Representative Cusson, on another bill that you authored in the regular session, HB 15. And this supports the ability for Lafayette Consolidated Government workers to transition from the MERS system to the PERS system, which is a better performing system. And that's going to help save Lafayette Parish taxpayers a significant amount of money going forward. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It was one of the high priority pieces of legislation for the delegation here in Lafayette and for Mayor President Guillory. We really worked hard on it. It seemed, on its face that it wasn't going to be a big deal, but when you start messing with retirement systems, then a lot of red flags go up. And in this case, we were moving our employees prospectively starting this November out of the MERS system and into the PERS system. And the issue is that the MERS system impacts about 130 communities across the state. So basically the 130 communities and all of their legislators were very concerned that it was going to increase their future liability on retirement while at the same time helping Lafayette's. And we had to basically come in and amend the statute using national experts about how Lafayette was not trying to get away from its own liability for our retirement system for the people that are already in it, but rather trying to, number one, take care of our liabilities, but at the same time putting our future employees on better footing. And the end piece of legislation accomplished all of those goals. We removed all of the objections from all of those municipalities. Many legislators from across the state worked on it with us, including Representative Bacala and others whose systems were initially impacted. But we put all those issues aside. The bill, as it finally stands, is going to save Lafayette about $700,000 in the first year, $1.4 million in its second year, and over $2 million in its third year. And so that's money directly coming from the bottom line. So in a situation where Lafayette is looking at some tough times ahead, it was really a big win for the administration and for the local delegation to get it across the finish line.
And thank you for your leadership on that. We're going to stick with, because there's not a whole lot of money, as you were saying, to go around at the local level or the state level right now. So we're going to stick with the theme of saving money. And I have a question for Representative Bishop and Representative Boyer. We'll start with Representative Bishop on the Capital Outlay Savings Fund, and if there's anything else too you want to say about capital outlay. And then I know Representative Boyer authored a constitutional amendment on the state expenditure limit, so we'll go to you next on that.
Sure. Basically what we did was, and I'm sure many of you have heard me speak about this before, I sat down with staff for several days in a row, long days, and went through the projects that we had in capital outlay. And I really think that the state needs to focus, or the legislature needs to focus on the major priorities of what's going to bring the state forward. And that is roads, bridges, ports, airports, clean water, as well as levee protection. And so once I explained that to everybody, I went through and I took out the amusement parks, the splash pads, the playgrounds, unless there was already construction started. Then I honored that, because construction money had been spent, construction had started, and I kept them in there. But I did remove a ton of the NGOs, and I did remove a ton of projects. And basically what occurred at the end of the day with P1, P2, P5, which is priority 1, priority 2, priority 5. And we came in $3 million less than the bond capacity, which it's been a long time since that's happened. When the administration gave me the bill, the cash surplus line was somewhere in the neighborhood of $179 million. And it was their intent to spend all of it. We did agree to put $70 million in the highway priority program, $15 million in the Mississippi River deepening, and $60 million in CPRA out of the cash, because those were federal matches and they needed to be in there. But what I did learn along the way is they give this money to these departments, and they create a fund, or they find ways to put the money away that the legislature can't touch it because it's theirs, and they create these pots of money. So when I sat down with the Secretary of DOTD as well as CPRA and said, how much do you really need? The numbers they gave me were very different than the numbers that were originally given to me. So I did cut a bunch of it. And we created, with HB 35, the Capital Outlay Savings Fund project. And we were able to put $105 million of the surplus cash from last year, put it aside. The only way it can be used is if we have to go in and use it for the Budget Stabilization Fund or future capital outlay projects. So it was a way, it has not been done since 1990 when we created the Rainy Day Fund or Budget Stabilization Fund. It had not been done before. And anything that would be line item vetoed, the money from that project would go into this fund. So it's a way of setting everything up in case we do have to come back in October and November because the economy doesn't pick up. If we have to come back, we do have a savings account that we can work with going forward. It was an important thing to me was that, I don't think that just because you make $1, you have to spend $2. I think when you make $1, you save 50 cents. And a lot of people did not exactly agree with me, but I will tell you, it was great that I could sit down with the speaker, President Senator Paige Cortez, and Chair of Reverend Fifth Senator Island, and they all understood what I was trying to accomplish. And it actually worked out. I think it was a rather historical thing that the Senate and the House worked together and everybody agreed, let's put some money aside, let's save it, because if we do have to come back, we have budget shortfalls and we got to take something out of the rainy day. we have some of this money to help replace those holes in the rainy day fund. Hopefully we do not, and we can use it for roads and bridges going forward in the future.
Thank
I'll
you.
be glad. You got it.
Representative Boyer.
Yeah, yes. And so, yeah, I want to congratulate Representative Bishop on his leadership with regards to the way he handled capital outlay. Representative Stefanski and I both serve on Ways and Means with him, and the things that were accomplished this year. I was excited to be part of it and to see the conservative approach that we used. And so, kudos to Representative Bishop for having that leadership. So regarding the expenditure limit, so the state, we have a constitutional amendment on the ballot this fall regarding adjusting the state's expenditure limit. The state has an expenditure limit currently. Basically, just for the listeners, the way this expenditure limit works is it's dealing with the state's obligation, not dealing with the federal dollars, but there's a maximum amount that the state of Louisiana can appropriate each year. That formula that they come up with is basically a 3-year average of personal income growth has a compounding effect. So let me just kind of give you an example. The way I'm trying to explain the formula, the way it works now. If the state appropriates $100 this year, and the expenditure limit is $105, the state has spent $5 less than they could have. Next year, when they go to base the new expenditure limit, they're going to take a growth factor and they're going to apply it to the $105, not to the $100 that we actually spent. So that expenditure limit continues to compound on itself. So throughout the years, it's continued to grow, and the legislature has had to adjust it manually on several occasions, so much to where if it hadn't been adjusted over the years, the state could have spent out of general fund dollars another $5 billion this year. They could have appropriated and then attempted to backfill it with tax increases. So what we're doing is we're changing the formula, number one. Right now, again, like I mentioned, it's based on 3-year average income growth. We're going to go ahead and change that formula. We're going to continue to use that number, but we're also going to use 3-year average of GDP growth in Louisiana. We're going to use the 3-year average of the CPI for the Southern regional average. So that's the inflation in the Southern U.S. And then we're going to also use in-migration and out-migration averages over the last 3 years. So we're going to come up with a growth factor that allows the state budget to grow based on those percentages, not to exceed 5%. So that way we can have a more reasonable formula. And you just think about something like the in-migration, out-migration. If you're not taking that into consideration, and we've had a big out-migration of residents, well, now you're asking the government to grow, and we have less people using the resources, and you're also asking less people to pay that increase in the taxes. It's just not a prudent way of spending and not a prudent way of being good stewards of the state's money. So this fall, it's going to be on the ballot. This has been attempted, from my understanding, for the last 10 or 12 years and has not been successful. Finally, we were able to get it out of the building and onto the voters' ballot. So this is going to be something statewide that we really need to promote as a good way to have fiscal conservative ways of spending the state dollars. And I hope we can get broad support of it. We did have bipartisan support for it in the legislature. So hopefully we can have the same thing on the ballots this fall.
Well, and to speak to the strength of our delegation, you said it's been a decade in trying to get this done, and you did it in your first year. So that shows how strong our delegation is at all levels. So thank you for your leadership on that. And we had a board meeting yesterday, actually, where we looked at the constitutional amendments, and we did take a position of support on that one. And so we're looking forward to working with you, hopefully, as we approach the November elections to help educate voters about it and why it's so important for our state.
I look forward to working with y'all. Thank you.
So we saved a big issue toward the end of the discussion, and I'm going to throw it to Representative Stefanski to talk a little bit about tort reform and the efforts there. But just a reminder, and I see that there have already been a couple questions submitted. For any audience members with questions for our legislators, please do submit them using the Q&A feature. Representative Emerson is already answering some of them. So if you want to submit them now, you might even get a text answer, or we can address them with our panel after the next couple of questions. So Representative Stefanski, could you talk about what was accomplished on the tort reform issue?
Yeah, definitely. So, we passed a tort reform bill in the regular session. It was ultimately vetoed by the governor. It had some language in there that made a lot of people uncomfortable. And so when the special started, that was one of the items in the call. And we probably had 15 or so different tort reform bills that got filed in the special session. One of those was the Speaker's bill, HB 57, which was signed into law last week. The Speaker asked me and a couple other legislators to help him kind of move that through the process. And through the course of that, it kind of got stuck on me. So I ended up carrying that bill through most of the process. And ultimately, we were successful. The governor committed to signing it, which he did last year. And it does a few things. So the first thing it does, it brings our jury trial threshold from $50,000 down to $10,000. We also created a new bond. If you make a claim that your case is worth between 50 and 10, you have to post a $5,000 cash bond within 60 days. The second thing that it did deals with direct action, which is the way you can sue people here in Louisiana. And one of the common complaints from insurance carriers is that they're allowed to be not only named as a defendant, but talked about during trial. And if you mention that there's insurance and make the insurance company pay and all these types of things, the judgments will be much higher. So we prohibited speaking about insurance coverage during the trial, unless it's an issue, unless it's one of the key issues of trial. So we limit what you can talk about during trial as far as insurance coverage goes. The third thing is we have in Louisiana a prohibition of introducing evidence, whether or not a person was wearing a seatbelt. We have removed that, so that if a person was not wearing a seatbelt, that's something that the trier of fact, the judge or the jury can hear now. And then finally, the biggest component deals with what's called collateral source. And what that means is the layman's term for that basically is if you have a policy of insurance that pays part of your bills, you're now limited in your recovery to what was actually paid by that health insurance company. I mean, what was actually paid, not billed. We also added something that says the difference between what is paid and what is billed, there's going to be a savings there. And we gave the judge some discretion to award a percentage of that savings in order to compensate them for having to go collect that money for the insurance company. Because when you go and collect the insurance company's money, your health insurance or Medicare's money, for instance, there's a cost associated with that. You had to hire a lawyer. You had to pay premiums for usually multiple years in order to access that coverage. And so it compensates those plaintiffs for going and collecting that money. So those are the four big elements of it. It was a tough hurdle to cross. There were a lot of different interests involved in it, and a lot of different people had opinions on what tort reform should look like. But luckily, with the Speaker's leadership and the Senate President's leadership, who was heavily involved in it as well, we were able to get something that accomplished, a big hurdle and a lot of goals that people have been working towards doing for probably the last 20, 30 years. So I'm excited about that. Hopefully, the intent of doing all this, of doing tort reform, is so that we will create competition, drive down our cost of insurance, to make it more affordable to not only operate in this state from a commercial standpoint, but also your everyday drivers, trying to drive down our high cost of insurance to where it's more affordable just to be able to drive on our roads. So I'm excited that it passed, and happy to answer any questions specifically about it as well.
And I know all of you spent a lot of hours debating that issue during the session. So I'm not sure if anyone else wants to chime in on that issue, or if there are other issues that we didn't ask about specifically right now that anyone wants to cover before we start with some of the audience questions.
Andre, I have one that I'd like to bring up too. Another bill that I worked on that I think is going to be important from an economic development standpoint. And Troy and I had some extensive conversations about it, and is creating ITEP-ready parishes. Currently, the industrial tax exemption program, you have to bring businesses who want to expand or relocate into an area, but before the municipalities that govern the taxes. So, like in Lafayette Parish and Iberia Parish's standpoint, before the sheriff, before the school board, before the parish council. For those parishes that want to be more aggressive from an economic development standpoint, we're allowing them the opportunity to be what we call ITEP ready. And ahead of time, those entities within a jurisdiction can actually vote to say, hey, if your business is coming to our area and it meets all the standards that they've set forth on the state level, we're going to automatically grant you, if you're going to create so many jobs, if you're going to spend so much money on machinery and equipment, we're going to go ahead and automatically grant you this ITEP exemption without having to bring you through the ringer of going before the school board and the parish council and the sheriff. And then what it does is it takes some of the conflicts of interest out of it also from a political standpoint. And it shows businesses who are looking to locate that, hey, we're serious about bringing you here and we're serious about economic development. So that's something else that we're hoping to promote throughout the state. That'll be good for business.
I'm going to channel to my inner George Swift here because I see him on the webinar, and I figure he would want us to ask y'all too about something we engaged you on before session started, and that's our efforts to work with the southwest part of the state, the Lake Charles region, and to kind of come together as a super region to promote our shared interests throughout the southwest Louisiana, and particularly as it relates to the redistricting process that's coming up, and kind of working together to make sure that the 3rd Congressional District stays as unified as possible. So I know Representative Boyer, you're on the House and Governmental Affairs Committee now. I know that there may be some changes in that committee structure over the next year as well. So I don't know if any of you, and I know at least 2 of you were at our meeting that we had in Crowley, which we call the demilitarized zone, right between Lafayette and Lake Charles, when talking about our super region. So if y'all would want to comment on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the chair of HG&A, is Stephen Dwight from Lake Charles, and so I think most of us here have a really good relationship with him. We kind of on the House, we all sit, most of us except for Representative Boyer, all sit in the corner that we kind of call the Cajun corner, and so when you sit close to those other legislators, you really do develop a great working relationship. And Stephen's a good friend of mine, and many of the others on this panel. And so I think we're going to have a great working relationship with him, and we are really, and from my opinion, unified of that goal of making sure that we stay in one congressional district and making sure that our districts stay very, concise from the standpoint of, we're all Republicans on this panel. We're all very pro-business in our stances, and we want to make sure that our areas are represented in that way. That's how I feel. And so, I mean, that's important. And even digging down to our individual House districts, it's going to be very important to watch that, the Senate districts, but especially in our congressional districts, making sure that Lafayette and Lake Charles stay together, I think, is a very important thing. But Representative Boyer maybe can speak a little bit more of that sitting on the panel, on the committee rather.
Yep. So I worked closely with Representative Dwight, and he's also running for district attorney down there, so we could see a change there. But we spoke about it often about Southwest Louisiana and the importance of sticking together, and you can see a lot of the initiatives that were taken that are good for the Lake Charles area, Calcasieu area, are also good for the Acadiana area this way. And so it's a great relationship. If Representative Dwight is fortunate in his quest, I'm jockeying for his seat to be down there with the rest of the Acadiana folks, so we can share stories as well. But it's all been very positive. I think the meetings we had before the session were a great start and a great initiative, and I think we need to continue moving forward in that direction.
I'll touch on that as well, if you don't mind. I can tell you, and I hope none of the panel members, not panel members, but those that are listening, are from the New Orleans area. But I will say, if you look at the amount of chairmanships, vice chairmanships that come from the Acadiana region, Southwest region, I'm sorry to New Orleans, but they've controlled it long enough. It's time for our Lake Charles, Lafayette, and the other Acadiana areas. I'll continuously warn that we now need to bring back the money and the projects. So we have to work together. And I can tell you by this last session, I definitely say that we're all working very well together. And I look forward to continuing to doing that for the next 3 years.
And one of the things y'all charged us with too coming out of that meeting was promoting participation in the census as a way to make sure that we're counting everybody in our region so we get all the dollars that we're due. And make sure that we maintain the strength of our area. So that is our current charge right now, and we've been doing what we can to promote the census as an organization. And we'll use this opportunity as a call to action for the audience to take the census and encourage those in your networks to make sure that they're filling out the census as well. I see we have about 15 minutes or 20 minutes left for Q&A from the audience. So please do keep the questions coming. There was one follow-up on tort reform that I saw come through from Angela, and so I'll throw that to you, Representative Stefanski. And it's something that was debated in the session, I know, about guarantees of insurance rate reductions as part of tort reform. What can you share about that?
Yeah, you know, so the speaker's bill, I actually did not want to include some of those. You know, some of the bills that you saw did have guarantees in it. They had mandatory rate reductions, and then some spoke to whether or not it was actuarially justified. Then you had to reduce it. I think that's a slippery slope to go down. You know, I talked to a ton of people during that process, and there are no guarantees. That's a reality. But what we've done in the bill is we've addressed the key issues that they're telling us are going to have the biggest effect on our insurance rates and increase competition. And so the hope is that it does drive down those rates. And the hope is that we create competition and it becomes a more friendly environment to write insurance here in Louisiana. But this bill in its final form did not guarantee anything. And, you know, one bill even had a sunset. If you didn't get this mandatory rate reduction, all the laws reverted back. I thought that was a bad idea. I thought that's dangerous, and it kind of throws our civil code into a little bit of chaos if those rates don't go down. And while we're not guaranteeing any rate reductions, I can tell you, I've talked to enough people in the industry. I've talked to everybody involved in this process, and targeting these issues for commercial, their big issue was collateral source. So trying to drive down some of these medical costs, some of these what they call phantom damages, because it's not what you actually have to pay. It's just the billed amount. And then for personal auto insurance, your jury trial threshold is going to be huge. You know, our minimum limits here in Louisiana are $15,000. We lowered our jury trial threshold so that the amount that you can request a jury to lower than that. So I really do think we're going to see savings on both your commercials and also in your individual auto policies based on those two key things. Direct action and seatbelt are nice too. And actually, one of the studies I saw, seatbelt said that seatbelt law was going to have the biggest difference in our auto insurance premium. So, but while there is no guarantee, again, I can tell you we have addressed the 4 outlying issues and the 4 key issues that the experts are telling us are going to drive down auto insurance rates.
Thank you. And another question, or a couple questions that I saw come through, which Representative Emerson has already addressed, but I may let you speak to it for just a second. And that's kind of the next steps on the Free the Transcript bill and where do we go from here. And I think that shows the strong buy-in we have on our 55 by 25 initiative and figuring out how we can keep the ball moving forward with that.
And she's gone. No.
Yeah, no, sorry. My dog's barking, and so I was trying to shut the door. Yeah, sorry, I went ahead and answered some of the questions, and several of them were about my bill. But yeah, I really think that, I think as maybe Angela asked, I really believe that a really great next step is to try to push some of the university systems. I think the UL system's a decent candidate for that. Maybe I know that there's been some support there, and I don't know, Dr. Salva might jump in and say, no, but you know, I think that if one of the systems adopts the policy, maybe even just as a trial run and just to see how it goes, I think it could, you know, because the biggest fear has been obviously the ability to collect the debts. And I certainly understand that because, like I said, this wasn't about absolving debt, just about trying to make sure that the students can go to the next step of furthering education or getting a job to be able to pay back some of those debts. So I think if one of the university systems were to adopt it and kind of be a model to show the other ones that, hey, we're still able to do this at a really good rate, and Office of Debt Recovery has been able to help us out, and we've been able to collect all the debts owed, then I think that that'll be a really great start. We're not going to let it go. I think we're going to keep pushing it. And I think, like every piece of legislation, education is key, just to make some of the stakeholders feel more comfortable with it.
Thank you. Have seen a few comments come through from Robert as well about reopening business, and particularly those businesses that are still restricted, such as bars and bars with outdoor spaces even. So I know there's a lot of effort right now to make sure we're doing everything we can to reopen business. And I don't know if any of y'all want to speak to that.
I don't mind chiming in on this. This is something that I've been passionate about from the beginning, and I actually took a group of small business owners to the Capitol last week from the Acadiana area that had some concerns about not being able to reopen. You've seen over the last week testimony last week from the Secretary of the Workforce Commission that our unemployment trust fund is just about busted. We're going to be expiring the federal unemployment benefits at the end of this month. There's some articles in the Morning Advocate over the last couple of days that talked about the trust fund itself. And the only way that we can solve all this is to basically to get people back to work. I know the governor wants to do it at some point in the near future. We don't know what the ultimate game plan is. We continue to look at the numbers as a whole. We've all got to do what we need to do to be safe around others and to wear our mask and do what it is to get the businesses open. I know there's a couple of different sides to the mask issue. And I don't think it's a matter of wearing masks and not wearing masks. I think it's a matter of getting the businesses open, and we need to do what we need to do as members of society to be able to get people back to work. And if it means I got to put on I don't like wearing the mask, but if I got to put on a mask to make sure that all my small businesses can get open, I think that's what I need to do. And so I'll take one for the team and do that to see that these small businesses have their opportunity. What's going to happen in the very near future when the unemployment trust fund is exhausted is we're going to start to borrow money from the federal government to replenish it. And then what happens is there's a constitutional mandate that we have to start as small businesses or as employers throughout the state. There's going to be increases on our payroll taxes that are going to go to fill that trust fund back up and ultimately be able to pay back the trust fund dollars that we borrow from the federal government. So if we don't, so those businesses that are able to stay open and remain open are going to be the ones that bear the brunt of it because they're the ones who have to fill that trust fund back up. So, that's my 2 cents on it. We need to get businesses open. We need to do it safely, but we all need to individually do our part.
Thank you. And in the 10 minutes we have left too, I think we might continue the theme on the state's economic recovery from COVID-19 and what y'all see next going forward. And I know there's discussion about another special session this fall. So could you talk about kind of where the discussions are at about that? And if you did come back into special session, what are some things you might discuss this fall?
I would think if we do come back into a special session this fall and there's nothing concrete about it, that we're definitely going to come back. I think it's going to be address any shortfalls that we have in the budget. As things change, it'll be to look at the economy. What else can we do to stimulate the economy? It'll be more about trying to fix the business climate and what exactly we need to do. Now, that call, the discussions on what the call will be have not been made, or the discussions haven't even really started. So I would think it'd probably be mid-August before we would even start discussing what would be included in the call. But I would assure you that it would definitely be about how to stimulate the economy.
And I'll tell you, Andre, if our bars keep getting closed and that specific industry is targeted, which they're being right now, we have to do something to help those guys out. I mean, literally, you know, there's a lot of ways that COVID could be spread, but the administration chose to pick this one industry out in these one group of owners. And so we have to find a way to help them out if this continues any longer, or regardless if it continues any longer, we have to find a way to help them out. And that would be a priority of mine, certainly going into the special session if we end up having one.
So thank you for that. But another theme too that we can kind of close with, going back to the strength of our delegation and our partnership with the Lake Charles area in the Southwest Acadiana super region. I know we had some great success in the capital outlay bill this year with a lot of projects in our region that were included in that bill and are in line to receive funding. So hopefully we can keep building on that going forward, but wanted to get comments from y'all about the capital outlay projects that are included that passed out in the legislature this year, and how we can keep building on the momentum that we have with the strength of our delegation.
Andre, I'm gonna keep this one simple. We're just getting started. We're just getting started, I assure you. So, like I said, you know, Lake Charles did great with the port projects that they had. Lafayette did great with highway projects. Every area in Acadiana did great. I know Representative Stefanski's area did phenomenal in capital outlay. We're going to continue to push Southwest Louisiana. Like I said, the days of New Orleans getting everything they wanted, those days are done. It's our time to be in the sun. So we will continue, I assure you, we will continue to work together to make sure we build Southwest Louisiana going forward.
And I'll tell you, Andre, I'll make a quick comment on that. When you have, you know, the Senate president who's from Acadiana, the chairman of Ways and Means who's from Lafayette, you have the chairman of Rev and Fisk who's from the Acadiana area. It's going to be good things for the next 4 years, and it just is. And we have a strong working group. We have an area that I believe has been, you know, maybe overlooked in prior years, and that's not going to happen for the next 4 years. Acadiana is going to do great, and our region, I think, is going to do great. If there's money on the table, we're going to get our fair share, and that's all we've ever really asked for. But it's going to be very prevalent these next 4 years. So I'm excited.
Basically, what he's saying is get your applications ready, get them submitted, because I promise you there is going to be a lot of capital outlay coming this way for Lake Charles, Lafayette, and everything in between, I assure you.
Well, I would like to just end on that note. We can wrap up right there, but we have a couple more minutes, and we look forward to working with y'all on that too, and are really excited about what this means for our region and our super region. But the last question that we'll take from the audience that just came through, we talked about bars a little bit, but there was also a question about the arts and entertainment industry and impacts to that industry. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I made a quick answer on there just because I didn't know if we were going to get to it. But yeah, I think like Stuart said, Representative Bishop said, everything's going to be on the table, and you guys just need to stay in contact with us as always. Stay in touch with our offices. Stay in touch with One Acadiana. They're a really great resource, and Andre and different people are there in the Capitol all the time talking with us. So just make sure that we're aware how everything is affecting your business. I think that's the biggest key. Is just, because sometimes, I mean, obviously we know all businesses are being affected right now, but you might have a specific thing about your business that's really, really being affected. So just stay in contact, keep the communication open. We're most likely going to be back in the fall. So everything will be on the table, and we're going to try to help as best we can.
Well, I think that was a great way sort of to conclude too, with closing thoughts from everybody. So appreciate that, and want to go around to give everyone a chance for some closing thoughts. And if there's anything else too you wanted to say, Representative Emerson, before we close.
Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is really, really important. We appreciate the questions. We appreciate your involvement with One Acadiana and with the whole Acadiana delegation of the legislature. You're the reason that we know how things affect you on the ground. So again, just please stay in contact with us and email us, call us, come to the Capitol. We're always here.
Good. I'll start at my top. In Zoom, Representative Stefanski, you're on my top row, so we'll go to you next.
Yeah, no, I want to touch on a little bit. We had a very successful session, in my opinion, on a bunch of different areas where we accomplished some things that have been tried for a number of years, and they were never able to get across the finish line. I think we have a Senate president and a speaker who are working together as a team. And I think we're going to see a lot of great gains, especially for the business community and for our business climate here in the state. And so I'm excited about that. But I'll echo what Julie said. We have to know, what the issues are. We need to hear from businesses. We need to hear what your concerns are on how, especially these regulations and COVID are affecting your businesses, so that we can try our best to help. And so keep us informed. One Acadiana, y'all keep us informed, and we're going to do our best to help going forward. Thank you.
Next in line in my Zoom window, at least, is Representative Boyer.
Yeah, thank you, Andre and Troy and One Acadiana for putting this on. I think it's very important that we're here to be able to disseminate information, to be able to take questions from the people. I'm the lone freshman on this Zoom call today, and I still pinch myself that I'm humbled that the voters of the area have chosen me to be here. While campaigning, no one ever asked me. So, Representative Boyer, Candidate Boyer, how are you going to handle oil dropping below $1 a barrel? How are you going to handle a global pandemic? We are trotting forward, trying to represent the people. My goal was to be the voice for small business. I still aim to do that. If y'all have suggestions, if you have comments, if you have questions, reach out to me. I want to do everything to help small businesses in Louisiana, not just succeed, but really get ahead of the game. So reach out to my office, like the others said, and stay in contact. But thank y'all.
Thank you. And Representative Cusson, you're up next.
Thanks, Andre. In closing, I hadn't heard too much about oil and gas here. I wanted to comment that the oil and gas industry was pretty active during this session. We're looking at the issue that everybody's talking about. Bo just mentioned small business. The immediate jobs that have been impacted by COVID are obviously the most difficult thing that we're dealing with right now. The bars that are closed, and we're doing everything we can to try to reopen. But thinking about the post-pandemic future, we still have to work on policies that promote jobs and growth, particularly for Acadiana in the oil and gas industry. We passed several pieces of legislation this session. Namely, we passed a carbon sequestration bill. It was a Senate bill by Senator Hewitt that basically made Louisiana more friendly for carbon sequestration, the storage of gas subsurface using our pipeline infrastructure. That was a really important bill for future jobs. We also have a constitutional amendment on the ballot this fall that I want everybody to be aware of. It was passed by Representative Huball. It's changing the methodology of valuation of oil and gas for ad valorem tax purposes. That's going to be important to the bottom line of our businesses that are just trying to stay alive, impacting the bottom line when we can't impact the top line right now. One of the big issues that we had was the coastal lawsuits. We had several pieces of legislation that took on the coastal lawsuit issue from different standpoints. The oil and gas industry has recognized the coastal lawsuits as opposed to the land-based lawsuits, which are also devastating the industry. But the coastal lawsuits are important because they're being brought by government, by parishes and the city of New Orleans against 75 oil and gas companies, basically in Louisiana and across the country. And it's really stifling capital from coming into the state of Louisiana. So we addressed the coastal lawsuits. We didn't get some of the bills across the finish line because of many parishes that have such strong delegations, and these parishes that have filed these lawsuits have really come to the table to try to keep the lawsuits active. Lafayette is not one of those parishes, as you can imagine. Number one, we're not on the coast. Number two, we wouldn't support it even if we were. But Vermilion Parish does have a lawsuit against the oil and gas community. So we're going to continue to look at that from a substantive and a procedural standpoint to see if we can't basically put that in a posture where the state of Louisiana looks at it as a state concern rather than each individual parish looking at coastal lawsuits and their issues with the oil and gas industry as a parish concern. We think oil and gas is a state concern. And here in Acadiana, we know how big of an impact it has on the state of Louisiana. So we need to address the coastal lawsuits. We're going to keep fighting on that. Lastly, and it seems kind of insignificant, but it was very important because this is a movement across the country, starting in California. We addressed and prohibited the prohibition of natural gas appliances in the state of Louisiana. Now, that was something that was kind of under the radar, but this has happened in the last 40 years, even in Louisiana and across the country, and it started up again where the anti-oil and gas folks are coming in saying, hey, not only do we not want you to drill, we don't even want to promote it by using appliances that have natural gas capabilities. So we prohibited the prohibition of natural gas appliances. And we think that was a small token to show that we're still interested in not only producing it, but using the oil and gas here in the state. That's just a handful of the things that we addressed. But the oil and gas industry kind of, was staying silent for a couple of years as we worked on the gubernatorial campaign. Now that that's over, they really put forth a lot of their priorities in this session. I look forward to continue working for them and for my district. And I know everybody on this panel is going to do that for Acadiana and for the state.
We thank you for your leadership on that and your leadership as chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. So I guess we're closing with two chairmen, and we'll go next to the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Representative Bishop.
I appreciate you saving the old man on the panel for last. I want to say y'all need to feel really secure in the fact that you have the most talented delegation in the state of Louisiana. And the great thing about it, as I've said at the beginning of the call, we're always open to hear any of your comments. We look forward to hearing your comments because we don't always know every dotted I across T and everything and how it affects the business people. So hearing from you is extremely important. We're always extremely open to taking calls, taking visits in the back of the chamber. I'm not great with emails. Everybody knows that. But anything other than that. But I assure you we're going to continue to work together with the entire Acadiana district, Acadiana region, super region, and move this thing forward over the next 3 years. And look forward to working with y'all.
Thank you. And speaking of accessibility, I think all of your availability to be with us today speaks to that, and we really appreciate it very much. I'll turn it over to Troy if Troy, you have anything to say.
Well, I think we're pushing up the time, and so in respect to everybody's time, I won't take but just a minute. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Those who look at the leadership that we have in Baton Rouge, and it's amazing, and we're so grateful for it. And I look at the leadership that we have that participated in this call from our members, investors, and partners across the region. You guys have our support, and I hope that if there's anything that we can do for you, you never hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you, and we'll thank again Representatives Emerson, Stefanski, Boyer, Cusson, and Bishop for joining us. We're going to send out the recording of this webinar to everybody and make it available on our website. And we'll also send around our bill trackers from the regular session and special session in case you're interested in diving into more depth on some of the issues that were discussed. And we're certainly available to take questions or engage with you further on this, and look forward to continuing to work with our delegation, which, as Representative Bishop said, is the strongest in the state. So thank you all once again, and have a great day and be safe.
Thank you. Take care.